Okay, so thank you for coming. I appreciate you taking a little bit of your Sunday afternoon to hear about my trip. Just a little background. So I heard about this program on Facebook. Someone had posted a link for an application. It was for young adults from 18 to 30 to apply for a Steward program. So I knew it would be a volunteer program from the 21st of June to the 9th of July, that kind of time frame. And you got a chance to be with people from around the world. They were looking for 70, and half of those they wanted to be German, as they're local. They have local driver's licenses, and then the other 35 would be from the rest of the world. So I eagerly applied, handed it to Larry. He handed it to the right people, got it to where it needed to go. They handed it off to people in Hanover, Germany, and in January of this year I was notified that I was accepted to the program. Took about a day to decide and make sure that my kids would survive without me, and then accepted it. So I was very happy. At the time when I left, I thought I was the only one from the United Church of Canada going, as that's what I was told from head office, because they weren't actually told that anyone else had been accepted. So there's actually 5 stewards from the United Church of Canada, 3 from Ontario, 1 from Newfoundland, 1 from Nova Scotia, which was fabulous to have other Canadians there as well. So that was the group shot you saw at Kids Time. So my plan is to kind of go through what my day-to-day was like so that you get an idea of what I did over there. Feel free to stop me and ask any questions. I'll try and explain the pictures as we go, and then we're done. So the World Communion of Reformed Churches has 230 denominations worldwide. It covers 133 countries and about 90 million people. So it has everything from Congregationalists, Methodists, Presbyterians, Reformed, United, and Uniting churches. And there was 633 delegates from those things that came to this General Council that happens every 7 years. So the previous one was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The time before that, it was in Accra, Ghana. So it really varies on where it was. But it was in Germany because it's the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. So there was a big celebration in Wittenberg. So I left Wednesday, the 21st of June at night, said goodbye to my mom and husband and kids at the airport, and hopped on a plane. And the first part of what we did was a youth gathering. So we got in this little town. It was a kind of a Catholic suburb of Leipzig called Zwickau. And they rented out these housing units to groups that wanted to go there and facilitate, kind of like what Five Oaks does. They just rent it out to groups. So we had different programs that we could choose from. Every morning started with worship, every evening ended with worship, and then we could choose from different seminars and workshops to go through the day. There were some mandatory and some optional. So the first full day was Thursday, but I was exhausted. I had been up for 36 hours, so I didn't really have a lot for people to do, just to kind of get situated, get to know the other people. So the Friday, they gave us an option of walking a pilgrimage. So it was about 8 kilometers round trip, and after each kilometer, they told us to pair up, and then they asked a question that you had to discuss with your partner. I ended up being paired with another Canadian who ended up being my roommate for the rest of the time, which was fabulous. And we went to an old mining area. So the middle picture is the area that was mined about 35 years ago. They removed 2 towns just to mine for 2 years, and then said you can't come back because it's destroyed. But the German government spent millions of euros to rehabilitate the area. It's a beautiful conservation area now with a man-made lake from where they were mining. And then those are the different mining equipment that they used. They were massive. The picture on the right is just me standing beside one of the scoops on the big wheel. It was massive, but they left it there as a reminder to respect the environment that you're in.
Was it coal mining?
I don't believe it was coal. I think it was precious stones or nickel. In but yeah, so it was really interesting to see because it was a beautiful area, and then you get out and they had different, plaques with what had been done, and unfortunately the people who were living there were removed and then never came back. So they keep it as a reminder of what happened. But the town itself was beautiful. It was quiet. There were beautiful churches all throughout the town. The two bottom pictures, if you can see that, if my laptop's not in the way, was inside the chapel that we used for worship. It was very interesting. It was just a big stone cube, so the acoustics in it was beautiful, stained glass, and we were also welcome to join any of the Catholic services that we wanted to witness. We weren't able to participate in the communion if we chose to sit in that, but we were welcome to sit. They made us feel very, very welcome. So those are the 5 Canadian stewards that were there. We got to become very close, which was fabulous, and we're still keeping in touch now 3 months later, which is great. And like I said, one is from Halifax, and then the girl who was in Newfoundland actually just moved back to Ontario, so now there's 4 of us that are in closer proximity. So after Friday, Saturday we got to choose what jobs we wanted to do in the general council portion of it, and there were different things that we could choose from: registration, welcoming, worship and music and things like that. But they needed 4 people to travel to Berlin, which was 2.5-hour bus ride to welcome delegates at the airport, put them on the correct bus to then bus them to where they needed to be. So I volunteered because I'd never been to Berlin, and why not? You're there. So there was actually 3 Canadian girls and 1 German girl who went, and we spent 4 days in the Berlin-Tegel airport. The plan was to split the shifts so that 2 of us were in the morning and 2 of us were in the afternoon, but I don't know if anyone realized what the airport layout was like. So it was basically a giant circle, and every terminal had a different departure and arrival gate. It wasn't 1 big gate or 2 big gates, it was 15. So it didn't really work out that we could split it. We were all there for 12 to 14 hours a day, which was okay. It wasn't as bad as it sounded. So the picture on the left is actually a bathroom. You have to pay in some places in Europe to use the bathroom, so it was 50 cents to get in and go through the turnstile, do your thing, and come back out. The middle picture is armed police officers. They had, in many airports in Europe, they have armed police officers there. If you've never been to Europe, it can be a kind of an eye-opener. It wasn't as heavy as I've seen at Charles de Gaulle in Paris, but it was still kind of odd to be sitting there waiting for somebody and their armed guards right in front of you. And then a local train station, right. So from the Sunday to Wednesday, we were in the airport, and Monday we actually had a shorter day, so we were there, we left at about 2, because we had nobody else to pick up, and got to sightsee a little bit. So we spent the afternoon sightseeing in Berlin as much as we could. So there's a picture of our little welcome sign that we had to hold up and wait for people to come out. And then the Berlin Dome is on the top right, and they had just beautiful sculptures kind of everywhere. Berlin I found very polarizing, as a lot of capital cities are, major cities, is that you get well-kept areas, very historical areas, and then you get kind of the bad areas. But in the very nice areas, they put these beautiful sculptures around, and a lot of them had no plaques or markings, so you just had to interpret on your own what they were, which was fascinating. So the picture on the bottom right is just different thinking poses, and you could circle it 3 times and see something different. So it was very interesting. So then we have the Ark, which was actually moved. I don't know if the physical thing was moved or the borders were moved, but different countries claimed it at different times, and then finally it was put back in Germany. And the wall, the Berlin Wall, actually stood right on the opposite side of it from where I took the picture. They had minions walking around that you could pay and get your picture with it. So I got a cute picture because my son loves minions. And then the Berlin Bear, they're everywhere. They could cost you as little as €5 for a little one or €70 for a big crystal one. But because Germans say it Berlin, it's bear, that's their symbol now. Or at least that's what was explained to me by a German. And then at the Ark they also have a room of silence where you can go in and pray or contemplate and just be in the history of it all and take it all in. We also saw, this is a Holocaust memorial. So it's hard to tell, but those are stones. There's 1,111 stones, and each stone represents 1,000 people that died. They didn't include, at the time that this was built, homosexuals that were also killed. That was just to symbolize the Jewish people, which I found very interesting because that number seemed off to me, because when I was in school we were always taught 6 million Jews perished in the Holocaust. So the number was very different, but they've added to it over the years, more stones over time. But everywhere you look, it's very linear, so you could walk forever. We didn't even walk the whole thing, and it's just never-ending stones, and you can get kind of lost like a labyrinth. So it was very beautiful and moving. And it's right in the heart of the city, so you kind of walk out of a touristy area and then it's right there. So it's very powerful. So on the right is me over top of where the Berlin Wall used to be. I was saying earlier that the wall, you'll see on the next slide, I was envisioning a huge wall, thick, very high. It's not like that at all. It was maybe 6 inches, a foot thick, and only 8 feet high. Because I guess they didn't need it to be big because it was armed at all times. These stones on the left are from the Reichstag, so it's a parliament building where about 90 people were killed trying to get in. So they've put their names on the stones and placed it right outside of the parliament buildings that are on the bottom left there. So this is the East Side Gallery. If you can see on the right, that's the wall. So they've kept up parts of the wall throughout the city. The East Side Gallery is one where artists have taken this chunk of the wall and made it beautiful. So there's different art pieces on each section of the wall, signifying different things, and different things have been added over time. But it says on the left that the wall was built in '61, it was taken down in '89, and then the East Side Gallery was made in it was left in 1990, and then they've made it into a gallery in 2009. So it was very beautiful, but like I said, it was very odd to see this small wall that was feared for obvious reasons. But someone who didn't live there, I was envisioning something a lot different. So it was good to get out and sightsee in Berlin, as we did do a Berlin day later on, but we didn't know how much sightseeing we'd do there, so we thought we'd cram a bunch in at the time and get it done. So Wednesday that we were in Berlin was our last day, and it was actually my birthday. So on my birthday, I spent 14 hours in the airport. I had a little glass of champagne with lunch because it was my champagne birthday, so I turned 28 on the 28th. And I actually met another group of Canadians. So there was a high school group that was there from Newfoundland, just outside of St. John's, and they were doing a Canada and the World Wars tour. So I took a picture. This girl was very nice to let me take a picture of her back, because they had shirts. They had the Government of Canada symbol on the front, and then everywhere that they were hitting on the back. So they started in Berlin doing the Berlin Wall, the topography of Terror Museum. I'm going to say this wrong. It's a concentration camp. I can't say. Checkpoint Charlie, and then they moved to Amsterdam, did Anne Frank House, then they went to Ypres, Passchendaele, Essex Farm, Sanctuary Woods, over to Flanders Fields, and then ended in Paris. So they were doing that in 10 days, trying to hit all these war memorials. And I also took the picture because my parents are going to Paris and Brussels in about a month. So, and this is what they're doing, is a lot of the war memorials. So I just snapped a picture for them to give them a little idea of what they could do. So then we ended up leaving very late. We left Berlin at about 9:30 at night, so we didn't get back to Leipzig until about midnight. So the coordinator of the stewards was very gracious enough to let us sleep in a little bit before starting the day, because the general council portion actually started that Thursday, so we had to get right into the swing of business. So because we were away, we didn't, the four of us didn't really have jobs, so we were just kind of thrown in wherever they needed fillers. So the first day that we got back, there was a reception at the new City Hall, and which was fabulous because we got to see a bunch of people. So I was standing there looking pretty in my red shirt, pointing people to where the bathrooms were, where they could find the food, making sure everybody knew where it was going. So it was interesting because there were sometimes language barriers. I can speak enough French. I could get by with Spanish on what French I know, and like hello, goodbye in German. So it was interesting. And I actually had a man from New Zealand who I was chatting with ask me to speak slower because he couldn't understand me through my Canadian accent. So I thought that was interesting because I don't have an accent. So I thought he was joking until I looked at his face and I could tell that he wasn't joking. And I was okay. So I slowed it down and it was fine, but gave me a good chuckle after. And the couple on the top right are from Newcastle. So I just happened to say hello to them. Where are you from? From Canada. They explained where they were from. I said, oh my goodness, I'm from Curtis. We're basically neighbors. This is fantastic. So they're from Newcastle Presbyterian, which is nice. So being my first day in the council, it was kind of like a little slice of home. So I said, can we take our picture? And they said they'd come visit me on a Sunday. But they said, oh yeah, we've been to Faith before. And who's the new minister there? I said, well, I don't think he's new, but his name's Larry. Larry's been there for 10 years. So it had been quite a bit. But then just different people I met along the way. So my roommate, and then this gentleman's name is Jordan. He's going through for his doctorate of theology, and he actually won an essay prize to be there. So he got kind of a free trip there and accepted his award for the essay he wrote. So Friday was another early start. We went to the Nikolai Church, where the federal president of Germany was speaking at our worship. So he's actually the German head of state. Angela Merkel is actually number 3 in order, which, if you think about it, so is Justin Trudeau under the Queen and the Governor General. So he's basically their queen, so he's kind of just a speaker. So he came out and did a speech during our church, during worship. The church is beautiful. Every European church is beautiful. But it was actually where Bach released one of his cantatas in 1723 and was musical director there. They had an interpretive dance that's going on in the middle picture. And my job there was to make sure people didn't sit in the front 3 pews. So I had to stand there and say, no, you have to stay. You have to sit here. At first it was the first 8 pews. So people were sitting in what they thought was the front rows, and then as more people came in, they said, no, you can up it 2 rows, and then up it so that there was only the front 2 left. So then the people who were originally in the front got mad because they had front row seats, and they were there at 6 o'clock in the morning for these front row seats. But some people were very generous and said, you're just doing your job, it's fine. Thank you. But my background's in customer service, and I worked in hotels, so I could kind of brush it off most of the time, which served me well through the experience. The only thing that I found a little disappointing was that the federal president, as he was talking about coming together and being a full communion, He didn't mention anything about the LGBT community, which I found odd, but I guess at the time he didn't realize how the vote was going to go, because that day Germany passed its same-sex marriage law. So I thought that was just interesting how it went. So it was funny that John mentioned this. Poor guy on the right fell asleep during the sermon because he had just traveled from Brazil that overnight and then hopped right into business. So he fell asleep at the back, and I took his picture and sent it to my friend, who that ended up being his dad. So they all had a good laugh about it. So I was embarrassed, but it was funny. Because I know my husband, if he's tired and it's warm in the sanctuary, he tries not to fall asleep during sermons, because it's warm, you get cozy, you're listening. So I thought it was funny. But so the outside is the Nikolai Church on the outside. Like I said, every European church is beautiful. But I find that where I am at the time, it feels a little bit more beautiful because it becomes your home. But then as you walk through the city a little bit, because this is the older part of town, there's new shopping centers. If you can see it on the right, in the middle picture on the sides of it, it's brand new buildings, but in the middle of it, there's a Holocaust memorial. So it's interesting to see where the consumerism is coming in, but then you have this little step back, so it's right in the middle of the promenade, so you have to stop and look at it or acknowledge that it's there to then walk around. So it's very interesting how they've done it, which I think is wonderful. Saturday was Canada Day, and you saw the picture of me holding up my little Canada pin, proud UC Can. So it was just a regular business day. So I was kind of floating around, handing out papers, making sure that everyone had what they needed. The bottom right corner is inside the conference center, so it was called the CCL, or the Mesa. So the picture of me is with the Mesa in the back, and they had this beautiful man-made lake that you could walk through, which is the middle picture on the right, and just take in the beauty. But it was a massive hall, and you'd need something that big to hold 600 plus people. I mean, there was over 600 delegates, plus the staff and the stewards, so you needed a big area, and all the little breakout rooms for discernment. It needed to be quite large, but it was beautiful. And at the end of the day, 3 of us Canadians went to Pizza Hut and had pizza and beer to celebrate Canada Day. So it was nice to be with other Canadians on Canada Day. So Sunday was Berlin Day, and Berlin Day was a bit of a mixture of things. It was both wonderful and also very disorganized and discouraging at times. So we were up and out of our hotel at 5 a.m. to get to our buses to bus all 600 people the 2.5 hours to Berlin. So you can imagine the logistics that go into something like that. But we were able to sleep a little bit on the way there, so that was okay. So we ushered people into the Berlin Dome, which is where we had our Sunday worship, which it's beautiful. The architect of it wanted it to look like St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. He said, if the Catholics can have it, why can't the Protestants? And he built it, and it's grand. It's beautiful. But it was a live televised worship. So they had different practices of the processional, going up the president and the general secretary, and they had a representative from each section of the world that we were in, each region, and they did a processional up, so they had to practice it 4 or 5 times before it went live at 9 o'clock in the morning, which was interesting because everybody had to be in their seats at 8:30, and you can imagine, 800 people sitting in a pew waiting for a half an hour before everything started, but we practiced the music that was going to be sung and all that kind of thing, so it was beautiful. So there's the organ. I caught a snippet of the sermon saying something about how people love organs. Is that what you said, Larry, in your sermon?
Some people love them very much.
Yes. I love the look of organs, and they sound lovely at the right timing, but I love the look of them, and like this one was was like no other that I've seen. It was massive. The bottom right, there was a pickpocket sign to be careful of pickpocketers. It was on the pavement as you're walking up the steps. As that is a problem in Europe. Pickpocketers tend to gather around religious areas to unfortunately take advantage of religious people. So then the next, the picture of me was that after the worship, the stewards all left to go to the foreign ministry office where we had a reception. So there were some of us that got to be in this little special group, and we got, it was just that we were first there. But we handed over our passports and got these special security passes. That meant we could go anywhere in the building if we really wanted to. Not that we could because we had too much to do. So it was quite a task getting my passport back, because I made it very clear that I was not getting on a bus without my passport. But it was interesting being given this special permission, and got to usher ambassadors in from different countries. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because the next picture, in the Berlin Dome, they have sarcophaguses of different royalty that are in there, which I had an interesting conversation with a man from Africa about why they would be in a church. I said it's very common for European churches to have tombs in there for people to go in and pay their respects. And we had about a 5-minute conversation about, isn't that idolatry? You're going into a church, and it's kind of like idols. And I said, if that's how you take it, then I tend to agree with you a little, but I'm just letting you know that this is what European churches do. And every pew seat was numbered. So if you can imagine having, we all kind of generally sit in the same seats at church, but if you had a little card that says, Enid sits in A1, that's where you sit. So every pew was numbered, which was interesting to see. And then
that wasn't just for that occasion.
No, that's how the church is, and that's how quite a few of the churches were. And then that's the top of the dome. If you can see it in the very center is a dove in the white. And it was gorgeous. So yes, so the next was the foreign ministry office. So as we were sitting waiting to welcome ambassadors, they have this beautiful sign, a picture of the world with the different ways that you say welcome in different languages, mapped out the world. So that was beautiful. The issue with Berlin, as I said, it was a little bit disorganized, was that it wasn't communicated to the bus drivers that after the reception they were to take us on different tours. So there were a few buses that were supposed to do driving tours of Berlin. There were a few buses that were supposed to go to refugee houses to see how they're doing there. And then there were some groups that were doing a walking tour that then would get bused back to Leipzig. The bus company only heard that they were driving us to Berlin and then back. So we had to wait on the bus for special permission from the bus company to give their drivers permission to give us a tour, to have the tour guides come on. So it was a little disgruntled, and you get a lot of disgruntled people as you're sitting there with a little brown bag lunch, and you're not moving for half an hour. And part of the job of a steward is to make sure everyone's comfortable, so we get the good and the bad with it. So you get all the angry people, but you did have some people singing praises as well. It wasn't just, I was very fortunate not to have a lot of negative people come at me. Some people did, but like I said, I'm able to brush it off for the most part, so so it was okay anyways. So once we did get started on the bus tour of Berlin, it was great because the little bit of sightseeing that I did while I was there was fabulous, but I got to see other parts of Berlin and actually have a tour guide to explain some of the things. So the Berlin Dome again, and then the federal president's office, so kind of like the Queen, when the flag's up, he's home. When the flag's not there, he's not there. So that was beautiful. And then they had a rainbow flag up because they had passed the same-sex marriage law. And if you can see, the top left is Checkpoint Charlie, so it's not a whole section of the wall, just pieces of it that they've kept up. The one in the middle is the entrance to the Berlin Zoo, so they've made the exterior with an oriental flavor, because that is where most of the animals that are inside have come from Asia. So they've tailored it to like that. And then that is an obelisk in Charlottenburg, which again was fought over. The Dutch thought it was theirs, the Germans thought it was theirs. It got tossed around, and now it's Germans. Could change. It could change again. So from Monday on, I was placed as a plenary steward, which means that I was in the main business hall, making sure that papers were given out, that thank you gifts to the speakers were given, and making sure everyone had a headset, because there's 6 official languages for the WCRC. There's English, French, Spanish, German, Indonesian, and Korean. So they had translators for each of those. Everyone who needed one had a headset, because even some of the speakers didn't speak English, even though that was the language of the business. Some of them didn't speak it, so even the English speakers needed translating at some point. But it was nice, because then I got to sit in and be in where the business was happening and get a little bit of a sense of what they did. And I got to be in a discernment group in the afternoon, so I got to hear about the business and then also be a part of some of the decisions, have my voice heard a little bit, which was fabulous. So I had my phone out, taking screenshots of different things that I liked, that I thought were interesting. So the top right gentleman, his name is Wesley, and I actually picked him up from the airport on my birthday morning, and he was very nice. He was from the Reformed Church of the United States. So if you can't read it, I'll say one of his quotes, say people in the back typing up quotes from their speech so that people could caption it. So it says, "Who is Jesus Christ to us today? Maybe instead of simply Facebook, we should call it Faithbook." So have a communion of everybody on a Faithbook instead of Facebook. There was another one that says, what is the God of life counter-creating in the face of idolatries? So that was a gentleman speaking about Donald Trump. He was an Irishman who had a lot to say about the United States president and how he's becoming an idol in his opinion. Then the bottom right is, there was a young adult go up and speak about different things that are issues in the Caribbean, and different things. So it says, "Daddy drinks, I'm beaten because I'm gay, the aunt was a human trafficker, and the schoolgirl is missing." So she actually spoke of a story of a friend of hers when they were children. Her friend was befriended by another little bit of an older girl, and was essentially groomed, and then within a few weeks she said, "Oh, do you want to come over to my aunt's house and have a play date?" And then that little girl was never seen again, because the aunt was a human trafficker. So these things are very prevalent. The human trafficking was a big topic when we were there, on what we can do as a World Communion to try and combat it and try and reach the people that are on the way to being trafficked. Get them before it happens. It wasn't all business. Every night we usually got together for a beer, take the stress off the day away, which was very nice. So these are just other pictures. The bottom right is in front of the mesa. It's just a beautiful rose standing out there. The top left is the mayor's garden. So the mayor of Leipzig at one point had some extra money, so he decided to make a garden for himself. And it's just a little square that they've kept up very, very nicely. The middle picture is at a cafe where we had dinner and spaghetti ice cream. So it's ice cream that they've kind of put through like a spaghetti press. If you've seen the Play-Doh, that it comes out like spaghetti, that's what they did with the ice cream. It tasted just like ice cream. It just looked like spaghetti. And then the very right picture is St. Thomas Church, another church that Bach was a musical director for. Again, beautiful church. We did a peace prayer one night there, and the cafe where the cow picture is right on the left of there, which was nice. And they had local buskers just playing music, and things like that. So the Tuesday, we heard from delegates from North and South Korea, so they both had representatives there, and they talked about how they would like to work together to become a family again. That was their words, was becoming a family again. Each country had a piece of a wooden cross that they then put together and draped with the colors of their country as a symbol of how they can work together peacefully to come down. And then when we were done, there was a few of us who just kind of walked around the city of Leipzig from kind of 6 o'clock onwards. So there's statues of Bach everywhere because that's where he was. The picture on the right was just another church that we stumbled upon, but the statue in the front it actually only had the First World War etched into it, and then you could see that they had plastered over it and then recarved it after the Second World War because nobody thought it was going to happen again, and then it did. And the middle picture is the only Catholic church in Leipzig. It's only about 20 years old because it's a very Protestant area, so it's very, very new. But in the glass is the entire Gospel of Matthew, printed in German and English, so each language had a line, and it stretched the whole wall. And you could see, if you looked closely, that on the inside of the church was mirrored as well, because you could see kind of through the paper. So it was very interesting to see. So Wednesday was probably my favorite day. It was our day that we traveled to Wittenberg, which is where the Protestant Reformation kind of started. That's where Martin Luther preached, and so it was a major highlight because I had read about the Reformation and kind of studied it since high school. So it was fabulous. So in worship, the stewards actually got to sit and just be a part of the day. We didn't have a big job. We got people on the buses, off the buses, walked them to the church, and then we were able to sit. As I wasn't part of the worship team, I was more able to sit and appreciate it. The worship team was actually in and a part of it. So they also had some documents signed. So this is on our walk to the church where we had worship. And then this is within the church, again, beautiful organ, a statue of Martin Luther that was on the outside, and then the documents that were signed. So the Roman Catholic Church, the World Lutheran Federation, the World Methodist Communion, and the WCRC all had representatives sign. So the Roman Catholic Church actually sent an ambassador of sorts from the Vatican to sign these documents on behalf of the Pope, and read a little speech from Pope Francis saying that, and the documents basically say that we all believe in the same thing, we are all family in Christ, now we have it on paper. Let's work as a communion more, instead of just being Protestants and Catholics. So it was very powerful to see. And an interesting move was that they had a woman give the sermon. So that's unheard of in the Catholic tradition. When you get high up, there's no women. And I watched the bishops that were there from the Catholic Church, and they never actually faced the woman at all. They sat there and they listened. But she gave a fabulous speech. She's from Syria and Lebanon. And she ended up actually being elected the next president of the WCRC. But what I took away from her sermon was that she stated that Luther's question wouldn't be, why is a woman standing in my pulpit? It would be, what took so long? So gender issues were also on the forefront because a lot of member churches, it's still illegal to ordain women. So that was a big issue. So the new elected representatives of the WCRC are half and half male, half women, a good variety of young adults, lay ordained. They tried to really even it out this time. So it was very wonderful to hear her speak at this big kind of culmination, because this is also where Martin Luther preached.
Was this the first time the Catholics were involved with this, in this meeting?
Yes, yeah. So the World Lutheran Federation and the World Methodists had already signed a document, but now the WCRC was kind of hopping on the bandwagon, and they said, why don't we get the Catholics to come in, as it's the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. Wouldn't it be nice to say, after all these years, we've come to kind of a reconciliation and a journey forward. So that was nice to see. After worship, lunch was a little hectic because you're trying to get 700 people to have lunch just outside of this little church. Everybody got meal tickets and were lining up, but stewards were allowed to just go, and it was kind of a free day, which was fabulous. So we walked around looking for somewhere to eat for lunch. We ended up in a cafeteria, which ironically was the university where Martin Luther taught. So we ate in another historical place by accident. So it was a happy coincidence. And then we walked to the Castle Church, which is where Martin Luther hammered his 95 Theses onto the wall. And now they have them etched in the side of the church, which is what I'm standing in front of there. So on the top left is another building that and in front of it they were setting up. They were having celebrations all year for the Reformation, music festivals, art festivals, so they were setting up. And a big thing that I love about churches over there is that they're so ornate. So even underneath the stairs to the pulpit were tiny triquetras all up the backside of the stairs. And then on the right is where Martin Luther is buried. So that's the faceplate of where he's buried in the church. Because he was a Catholic priest, he still was able to be buried there. And at night we had one of the German stewards give us a walking tour of Leipzig, so he kind of pulled up his phone and gave us some quick tidbits of the city, which was nice. But before we left, there was confusion with the buses in Wittenberg, so some buses had dropped people off at the wrong spot, and then they were told to go back to where the buses dropped you off. So then there was a line of stewards, kind of one every kilometer or half a kilometer, for about 5 kilometers, to say, keep walking this way to where the buses are. But it was nice, it was a beautiful day, and the top right corner is of a garden. So what I learned over there, which I didn't know from previous trips to Europe, is that in Germany, if you live in a city where you don't have outdoor space or a garden, you're given a plot of land so that you can garden, you can be outside, your kids can be outside. So everybody has outdoor space, green space, so they can be out in nature. So the gardens are plentiful there. It's beautiful. So Thursday, moving on to Thursday, it was kind of a good and bad day for me. Thursday was the day that I really hit home that I was not home. So I was missing my family a lot. But on the same hand, I got to hear a preacher from Bethlehem talk about the book of Acts and about how Pentecost, in his words, was a counter-narrative reaction to the Tower of Babel verses, which was an interesting take. They also had, the preacher from Bethlehem actually also believed that the Quran was written as an Arabic narrative to the Bible. It wasn't, in his opinion, not supposed to be another holy book. It was supposed to be an Arabic narrative of the Bible. So that was another interesting tidbit that I picked up in the plenary hall. And during the business of the week, heard from a Muslim man who was a close friend of Nelson Mandela's, and he talked about how he was a radical Muslim, but that shouldn't be scary, and that we should all be radical Christians as well, in almost evangelical, but to speak out about our beliefs and be at the forefront of issues. That was his take on things, which was interesting to hear from another religion coming to a big council like this, which was fabulous. But at the end of Thursday, we had our big stewards meeting because we only had one day of business left. So it was, we were able to get a lot of things off our chest. Our steward coordinator, who was also a volunteer, was fabulous. Deep love for the man. Because he was a volunteer and he dealt with a lot of the grief that we had, but on a different level, because he was supposed to be on the same level as some of the staff, and he wasn't getting the information that he needed to in good time to give us the information, and he could see how a lot of stewards were struggling with that. There were 15 stewards from Indonesia who spoke up about how they felt that there was a hierarchy within the stewards, that the German stewards were kind of on the top, and then the English-speaking stewards, because they didn't speak English as a first or second language, so that was how they felt at the time, which was unfortunate. But on the same hand, it was hard because as an English-speaking person, it was easier to do a lot of the things because you just could easier. So I think that a lot of it wasn't necessarily on purpose, but that's just kind of what came out of it, and it was good to kind of have an open air discussion about it. And also heard from a Syrian girl. She was actually detained upon entering Germany, one of the stewards, and for a few hours, and then when she was actually released, it was still a few hours later until she got her passport, just to come. And she was a beautiful person, and when she talked to her mom on the phone, her mom was scared for her being in Germany, which was odd to hear, but she kept saying, no, I'm with my preacher, it's okay, I'm with Werner, it's fine. And that gave her mom a peace of mind. And I spoke with her after our meeting, asking her if she ever thought about leaving Syria, and she said no, because it's her home. And she said that some days her dad goes to work and he says bye in the morning, and he says, bye, I love you, I don't know if I'm gonna die, but we'll see, and I'll hopefully see you at the end of the day. And that's how he leaves them in the morning. But they won't leave because it's their home. And I said that I don't know if I would feel any differently if it was me and my family. I don't know if I would leave, and it's impossible for us to know, being over here, how we would react in those situations. But yeah, so it was very nice to hear that she was having a great time. But on her way back, she has to fly into my brain's stopped for a second. Lebanon. She has to fly into Lebanon because the Syrian airport is closed, and then drive over into the border into Syria. And usually it's a 4-hour flight from Lebanon in, but they had to take it by taxi. So, because there was her and one other girl. So that was interesting. But let me just check my page, see if I forgot anything.
For the circles there, Ashley.
Circles. Oh, sorry, that is a love feast.
Which?
A love feast.
Love feast.
Yes. So it wasn't quite communion. So on the Thursday we had a love feast. It was like a chocolate cookie that we could just share and eat during worship. Wasn't communion. Because we had communion on the Friday, which was the last day of business. So Friday was more business and decisions in the morning, and then the WCRC had its election, so they elected their first female president, which is a lady, like I said, she spoke in Wittenberg, and which was, like I said, a very big step, because a lot of member churches, it's illegal to ordain women. And there was a gentleman from Pakistan who came up and said that this is fabulous what we're doing, but Pakistan made it legal for women to become ordained in the 90s, the early 90s, and they only last year ordained their first 5 women. So that's how long it took them to get to this point, even though it was perfectly legal. They just had a lot of pushback from communities and their churches and things like that, it's just a tough road for some countries. So it was interesting to hear about how people are wanting some change, but there's a lot of pushback from where they are. So we had communion, which was the most disgusting communion I've ever eaten.
The most what?
Disgusting communion
Disgusting.
bread.
Oh.
It was like dry paper. It was interesting because I would have much rather have the chocolate wafer from the Love Feast, and I thought it was gluten-free, and all the German stewards thought it was fabulous. They were eating it by the handful after the communion portion was done, and the rest of us were trying to get more grape juice to wash it down. But I mean, it kind of added to the day. It was just funny. But in final worship, I got to be in the choir, so I got to be up on stage singing a couple songs, which was really nice. And then we said goodbye. We said goodbye to some people. So one of the pictures that I showed this morning was to people from Trinidad and Tobago. They were wonderful. My roommate and I picked them up at the airport in Berlin. As they had to fly through Toronto to come to Berlin, so we're like, oh, Toronto, maybe we know somebody, and we didn't. But they gave us each pins from their country, which I have at home, which was really nice. So then in the afternoon, once we got everybody out of the building, then we could start tearing down and cleaning up, taking down all the paper saying, go here, there's bathrooms. So kind of had everyone on their way, and at night the staff and the stewards all got together for a dinner and party. So we ate some dinner and danced the night away. Everybody got to get dressed up and have a good time, kind of let loose. So on the left is our steward coordinator Werner and the two girls from Syria that were there, and then I really love the picture on the bottom right, if you can see it well, because it shows the diversity of the group that was there. Like I said, there were 5 Canadians, there were 3 Americans, and then everybody else was from all over. And even though they had asked for 35 German stewards, there was actually only 12 that got there. So Indonesia actually had the biggest representation in our stewards group because they had 15. But they also make up a lot of most of the member churches. And speaking of member churches, each denomination tried to have a little lunch throughout the week. So there was a United and Uniting Churches lunch where you could sit and speak with other people from the United Church in Australia, Uniting Church in Pakistan, like different United Church of Christ in the States, different places all over the world, and then the United Church of Canada got its delegates together and the stewards, and we all had kind of dinner together, which was also nice because then you can make connections with people at head office or different places. But my issue with the cleanup was that there was so much paper waste. So a big theme from the council was respecting creation and how we need to work on climate change issues, and because it was right after the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Accord for climate change, it was a big topic, especially one gentleman from the States made it his goal to have respect with creation put into every proposal that he could, which is fine, but everything that you see in this picture was thrown out. So those boxes on the right are filled with 40 to 50 workbooks that are probably 50 pages thick. They were all wasted. And pallets so I brought home books and books that I could without going over my luggage limit to try and save some trees. but yeah, so it was really to me terrible to see how much wasted paper went into something like this. But when you have 6 official languages and over 600 people, it's hard not to have some. That was just my personal issue. So Saturday morning we spent finishing the cleanup, and then there were 4 of us who traveled to the Battle of Nations, which I only found out about because the hotel/hostel that we were staying at, I met a man from Ireland, and he said, oh yeah, there's the tallest monument in Europe is 10-minute tram ride away. I I said, oh, I maybe should have looked up some sightseeing things in town, but I honestly didn't think I'd have time to sightsee in the town. So it was about 10 or 15 minutes away, and 4 Canadians took the tram and climbed up the 500 steps to see us. So this monument is where Napoleon was defeated at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. So I'm a big history buff, so I thought that was fantastic. And the view was fabulous. As I kept snapping pictures, and you could just take a huge panoramic of it. And the lady on the right I found ironic because the sign beside her says, "Do not sit on the ledge."
What?
It just says, "Don't sit on the ledge."
Oh.
And she's sitting on the ledge beside it.
So actually, that's just outside of Leipzig?
It's still in the city limits,
Oh, it's in the
but
city
it's kind
limits.
of on the outskirts of town.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, but it was gorgeous. 500 steps to the top. Very narrow passageways at some times, not as narrow as some churches and places that I've been in, but still you could get dizzy and things. So we just said our goodbyes Saturday night, and then there were a couple of us, including my roommate, who were up at 3 a.m. on the Sunday morning to catch a train to the airport to fly home. And on the flight home, I was very focused on not getting anxious about seeing my kids and my husband, so I didn't break down in an airplane. So I was just watching movie after movie because it's a long flight, and I was in the middle seat beside a window, and a man tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Can you open your blind?" I said, "Sure." The guy beside me was sleeping. He said, "We're over Greenland, and it's very rare," the pilot said, "to get clear pictures.
Wow.
It's usually very bad weather, so they have to go much over the weather." He said, "But the weather was clear enough that we could get low enough to take pictures." But the man said that I was the only person on the entire side of the plane that was awake that he could ask to
Oh, wow.
And he said, "Can I send my wife back to you?" I said, "Sure." And I actually started to cry for 2 reasons. One, it was spectacular, the views, you could see the icebergs. And 2, I was so grateful to this perfect stranger to break me out of my blinders to appreciate the last little bit of God's beauty on my trip. So it was beautiful and a great way to end the trip. So I tried to take a picture of the map that they have on the TVs of where it was. So it was the very bottom tip of Greenland that we got pictures of. And then the right picture is the CN Towers in there. So we came in from the north, so I was able to get a picture of the CN Tower as we landed. So that's my trip. Came home to 2 very excited children and unintentionally fell asleep at 5 o'clock that night. As I said, I'll just sit here on the bed for a second while you guys get dinner, and then fell asleep. So that's my trip. So thank you. Thank you for sitting. It was a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I get talking, and that's what it was. So I appreciate you sitting. If anyone has questions.
What's your best part?
The best part?
Best part that stands out.
It's just the people. I love the people. And that's why I said that in kids' time, is that I don't like to be alone. So I loved the people that I met. And most everybody was friendly, and the stewards, most of them were there to do their jobs and do a good job and be a part. It was odd being the oldest one.
Were you?
Because I'm used to being the youngest one, but because they only took from 18 to 30, it was odd that I was probably the most established youth there, because I'm married and have 2 kids and a job, and most of them were students of theology or philosophy and things like that. So it was odd, and there was a girl who became my friend who was almost exactly 10 years younger than me. She had turned 18 a week before I turned 28.
Wow.
But very mature. Most everyone was very mature, and I think that you have to be to do a trip like that. I mean, it was almost 3 weeks away, and I was fine. I've been to Europe before. I've lived overseas before, so it was okay for me. The hard part was being away from my kids, but the people were fantastic. So.
How did the North Koreans get there?
I don't know. I don't know. But even we had one steward from North Korea.
But-
So, I don't know.
Missile.
But you had a presentation. You had a presentation from the North and South Koreans.
Yeah, at that time I didn't have a headset to translate what they were saying. Because I was running all over the place, so I didn't have the opportunity to listen. They had an English speaker who said, kind of, these are the representatives, this is what they're doing, but then they also had Korean representatives come up and say their piece, but I didn't have a headset to translate what they were saying. So I don't know how they got there. Unfortunately, a lot of people had issues getting into Germany. In Berlin, we were supposed to have 12 people arrive on a flight from Brussels, which I believe was a connector from somewhere else, and only one showed up because they were denied access from their visas.
Really?
What a shame.
Darn Christians anyway.
Yeah.
What's the impact of this event? Like, how is it gonna change anything in our,
A good question. I don't know what the reach is, to be quite honest. I didn't know a lot about the WCRC before I went, and everything sounds fabulous of what they're doing. I don't know what the next steps are. They have an action plan, but I don't know how it's reached. You know, it's such a massive scale. I mean, it's the world. There's countries all over the world. I don't know how it gets translated to the member churches. Like, their delegates can come home and their stewards can come home and share these experiences with people and what they've done, and hopefully the elected party can, because there's a representative from each region as well that I believe is supposed to kind of keep check of what they are doing, and hopefully that's how it gets done. But it's tough.
It's aspirational.
Yes.
Right? They make pronouncements, they put out position papers and things, and they try to inspire and encourage people to sign on or get behind it, but they have no legislative binding power on any of the member churches. They're just, the information gets shared, and these are the goals, and we're in this together. And so
We are not alone.
Yeah.
the actual on the ground, it doesn't do much other than hopefully connect and inspire.
like, I never heard of this organization before.
Neither had I.
It's not as big as the World Council of Churches, but it's similar in that, you know, they get together and they say their piece.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Well, that was, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for staying.